Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. I'm your host, Adam, with my co-host, Mick Mulroy here. Today, we wanted to start with a topic that has really kind of exploded in the media world right now recently, and that topic is toxic masculinity, or essentially how Stoicism is anti that. It's a big thing that comes up in today's world, especially right now. Right, there's a Netflix documentary called Manosphere out with Louis Theroux. And it's really come to the fore because of some of the things that he's shown off. But also, I think as well, for a lot of people, including, Mick and myself, we're sometimes trying to figure out how the heck did we get here? Let's do a quick review for ourselves, though, of, this is a Google search definition, but I think it's something to kind of set us off here. So if you look up the words toxic masculinity online, it says, toxic masculinity refers to restrictive, traditional cultural norms that pressure men to act tough, avoid showing emotion, and dominate others, which can result in harmful behaviors and negative mental health outcomes. It emphasizes aggression, extreme self-reliance, and the suppression of empathy, ultimately harming men themselves, women, and society. So there are some key aspects that it highlights: emotional suppression, aggression, and dominance, anti-femininity, risky behavior. But it also talks about the impacts on society, things like the impact on mental health. There is an impact to individuals because this can lead to physical harm sometimes, where they say just tough it out and they don't go see the doctor for their broken leg. But also social harm, because it's been noted that toxic masculinity contributes to some very negative behaviors and social exclusion. So I'll wrap up my opening to say, I think if we were to think about this in the older types of words or definitions, people might bring up things like male chauvinism or sexism or even racism, which seems to be prevalent within the toxic masculinity movement right now. So that's the stage that we're setting for ourselves as to what that means. And I think, Mick, you and I today are going to talk about why that's not great and why Stoicism is actually anti that. It's quite the opposite, though people sometimes misconstrue our philosophical practice to think that it's connected to it. So do you have any opening thoughts for us? How do you feel about, where we stand right now?
I think, well, it's kind of interesting hearing you read the definition. I guess I'd start with this. I mean, we tend to give things new terms, but I guess when I was growing up, they would just call that person an asshole. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
now it's we're trying to be like scientific and create some kind of, I don't know, class for college or something, calling it toxic masculinity. But if you just read what you just said, it's a person who's boorish, a bully, and thinks whatever they are, a male in this case, is better than everything else, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty much just an asshole. So I'd start with that. And I'd also point out that there was a couple, not that you did it, but because you were reading the definition, there was a couple inconsistencies in the definition. So it said it was vacant of emotion and then uncontrollable anger.
Yeah.
So last time I checked, anger was in fact an emotion, right?
Yeah.
So you're not vacant of it. You have a lack of control of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because emotion isn't just, all the good stuff. Emotion is both fear and anger and happiness and sadness, and it runs the gamut. I mean, that's how we evolved. Right?
Yes.
And there are times, and we'll get to this, there are times when anger is appropriate, right? Not to go on a tangent, but I was just reading a story about how these people tortured beagles for the betterment of science. And all I was getting was angry, right?
Yeah.
And then in the story, it says the reason why they picked beagles is because they're so forgiving that even when you torture them, the next day they're wagging their tail, right? So that makes me really angry. I feel that as an appropriate response to the idea that you would torture a dog.
Yeah.
So I would start with that. They're not vacant of emotion. They have a hard time.
Selective.
These people, whoever they are, which I'll deem, uh, I guess if we're going to call them toxic males. Of course, there's females that exhibit this too, not as much, but okay. They're not void of emotion. They have an inability to control envy and anger.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. There's another inconsistency that you said in the definition. My rambling has made it escape me.
It's okay. I'll take a look. I mean, while I'm taking a look, I'll quickly say, yeah, I think one thing for sure is there's a weird selectivity to this, which is like they're selecting like man emotions, like aggression.
Self-reliance. That's what.
Yes.
Sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just
no. But I feel like it's very selective as well, which is very odd, right? Where it's like, real men are angry and forceful and aggressive and assertive and nothing else, which is super weird in my mind. But that's all I was going to say in response to you. Yeah, it feels very selective.
I don't know that that's ever been the case, that even men that we would consider very manly, like, I don't know, Teddy Roosevelt or something, would be comfortable with somebody who was abusive and a bully. Right. In fact, I think most men that we would, Chuck Norris, right? He just passed away.
But yeah, he did.
Right. I think Chuck Norris would be the complete opposite of everything you just described, right? So
totally agree.
He's soft-spoken. He beats up the bully. He isn't the bully.
Yeah.
Right. And he's somebody that Chuck Norris jokes are hilarious, but it's all about the fact
counted to infinity twice, right?
Right. So we consider him very manly, and he's the opposite of everything you just said.
Right.
At least his persona. And I think it's an accurate persona.
Right? I get that. So you wanted to talk about extreme self-reliance, it sounded like.
Yeah, because I don't view people who fit into the category that you've described as self-reliant at all.
Right.
They literally feel better about making people feel worse about themselves.
Yeah,
that's not
for
self-reliant.
Sure. They're also reliant on, like, because so much of this it comes from social media. They're reliant on the like. They're reliant on the retweet. Do you know what I mean? They're not self-reliant.
That's not self-reliant.
Right. Yeah. In fact, they're only reliant on others in many ways for their own happiness, right?
Right. And it's what I would be concerned about is that the people who are influencers, I think is what they're called, they try to promote this. And I want to get into some of the statistics that I found on young men nowadays, because it's important, that they're looking for something. And if they find this as a release based on what they perceive internally as, either they're not where they want to be in life, they're not happy with their situation, and then they turn it into, well, then I'm just going to group with a bunch of other people, usually men, that feel this way, and then I'm going to turn against the world, and then I'm going to exhibit all the characters. That's what we got to be worried about. But throughout history, I think people that fit that category were simply jerks, or I call them assholes, and that most men that were viewed as like a good example of masculinity would think the same way. I mean, it's just never, the Lone Ranger, right? Just go down back in history. They're always the men who, yes, they fight, but they fight for right.
Yeah. Yes.
They use their skills, they use their masculine traits, if you will, to defeat the Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So, and the other part of this, and I think it's promoted a little too much in colleges. As soon as my kids started going to college, I started hearing these terms. And it's just not, if you want to talk about an individual characteristic, you should, but when you label it as like a whole group,
right,
then you start getting into the same issues that we had with people labeling whole racial groups based on, whatever perception they had that was incorrect.
Yeah.
And then they just talked about the entire ethnic or racial group as if one individual from the group then exemplifies. You see what I mean? I think there's, for the people that are somewhat in the center, they start seeing the same characteristics on the far left as they saw on the far right.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so now every male that exhibits male characteristics is toxic, really?
Yeah.
Because that's not fair either. And it's
Right.
actually the basis of prejudice.
Yeah, it's tough because the application of a label to this, right? It allows it to be studied or qualified in some way, but I also feel like it starts a sort of us versus them attitude, anyways, right? Because it's simple for someone on the left to say, well, he's just toxic, he's just a toxic male or something like that when someone disagrees with them, and I don't think that's helpful either. I think having a label to describe the traits that we're talking about, I think, are very good, but at the same time, I think we get to this point where the labels aren't helping. Sometimes we have to talk about the detail, the meat of it, really,
Yeah.
right? So I thought it was interesting to think about this also. From why is it called toxic, right? And it was interesting because toxic is an adjective, right? I hate to be the guy with words all the time, but I do try to think about it this way, right? You know, it's toxic can be acting or having the effect of a poison, for example. It can cause harmful or malicious actions, right? Toxic is meant to be that. And I think, that's one thing that we're really talking about today, right? Is, I think you and I, in general, when we were first discussing having this podcast topic, it was definitely around the idea of like this is a harmful behavior. I think, right, is the first thing that would probably come to our minds. So, and that's something I think that we're really talking about here. Harmful in many ways. Harmful because, for example, if they're selective about only having man emotions like anger and aggression and assertiveness, then they're missing out on the rest of the human experience, right? They're missing out on joy. They're missing out on empathy. They're missing out on compassion and tenderness and sadness, as well as happiness and joy. So,
Which are
and
also, I mean, male emotions too. We're just identifying the ones that aren't helpful as male.
yeah,
I mean, why isn't empathy a male emotion? I'm not saying
yeah,
it's
for sure.
exclusive to males, but it's certainly not. We're not devoid of it at
Exactly.
all.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important thing here. Because also, like, the idea of picking out some of these ones, right? If someone doesn't show that emotion, all of a sudden it's an us versus them again, where it's like, well, I have empathy for somebody, and therefore I'm not showing off some extreme masculine trait, but all of a sudden now I'm just not like them. And you kind of go like, well, I don't think that's right at all. So
But
men,
if you
just like
break,
women, have a wide variety of emotions. Excuse me, sorry, but
yeah, no, good.
men as well as women have a wide variety of emotions. We all, and for some people, certain ones are more prevalent than others, and for other people, it's the other ones are more prevalent than others. And I think it's weird to say that there's only one way to be something.
Yeah, yeah, totally true. And Stoicism itself, there's a lot of reasons to get into Stoicism, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
But one of them, I mean, Seneca actually wrote a book on it, is anger. So at the core of what I think, college professors are calling toxic masculinity is an inability to control your anger,
yeah, yeah,
right? And that results in saying nasty things, being violent, or what have you. And I think that's always been a part of Stoicism,
yeah.
to help control it, obviously, not to promote
Sure.
it, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes, and I think it's important to point out, just like you could go to a church where you say, well, these aren't the best people I've ever met. Well, sometimes that's why they're there. I'm not
yeah,
besmirching churches. You get my point, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so you could have somebody, and I think you'll find this in Stoic groups, that has anger issues, but that's why they're at the Stoic group,
yeah,
right?
for
Because they're
sure.
trying to learn how to have a positive way to deal with it, because it
Yeah, for sure.
happens, right?
Yeah,
And especially in modern society where becomes less and less, personal and more, um, I don't know, difficult to deal with sometimes, with people who
yeah,
just focus on themselves at the exclusion of others. It's hard to
hmm,
keep, your temper. But I think coming to groups like the Stoic groups, and then you'll learn, of course, all the other things that comes to Stoicism. But that
Yeah.
can be a good draw for especially young men. I know men, but women too, have sometimes issues with control of
Yeah.
their anger. And it's important because it will destroy your relationships. You will almost never get your point across in a way that's effective if you can't do it, in a controlled manner. You'll
Yeah.
have very little influence on society, generally
Yeah.
speaking, because people don't want to see a silverback gorilla jumping up and down and yelling to try to get their point across. It just uh, it's just not effective, and
No.
it can destroy your relationship. So I would say that for both men and women, I would agree that it's probably more of an issue for males, but
Yeah.
we should treat people as individuals. If you have an issue with it, then you should look at Stoicism because it does a lot to try to, you know, get people away from that. Just start focus on yourself. To focus less on what you perceive as an insult and
Right.
realize it's really how you react to it that matters. That really matters. And so, whether it exists or not, I guess we can all agree that in some people all those characteristics exist. It's better that it doesn't, and the more you can control it, the better it is, not only for you and me,
Yeah.
but society, because that's
Yeah.
ultimately we're in a society, and you have certain obligations to be in a society, I think.
Absolutely. And the book that we're referencing is Seneca's book, which in Latin was titled De Ira, which means on anger. But essentially, that's the book where he equates anger to essentially temporary madness. And
Mhm.
there's an interesting kind of thread for all of this, right? Because we've had some episodes already about misconceptions about Stoicism and whatnot. And what I find a lot of the time when I meet people who get introduced to the philosophy, they sort of go, well, I'm looking for something that, like I'm not seeing anywhere. Like I'm looking for something that helps guide me with being empathetic towards other people, or, I don't want to suppress my emotions. I want to just be in control of them so that they don't own me, that it isn't like this temporary madness. And you kind of go, well, that's Stoicism. And they go, really? Because we tend to get brought into this broic world or whatever, right? But ultimately, I think, it's easy to explain how we don't believe that that's actually real, like a real connection in this world. I've met people who are like, "Oh, I read the meditations every once a year and I apply it in my life." And then it's like, yeah, but then they exhibit these traits that really, I think Marcus would be like, yeah, no, that's not really my thing. And you kind of go, well, you didn't really read it. You looked at the words on the page, but you didn't really get it. But, I think the big thing though for sure is the obligations we have. You're kind of talking about that, and that, and I think Seneca touches on this, right? Like we do have obligations as people. Like one thing that is definitely prominent in the toxic masculinity world is, as we already talked about, they label it as extreme self-reliance, but it's almost isolationist, right? It's like, I am my own island, which of course goes against what what a very famous um, person read or wrote, excuse me, many years ago about how no man is an island.
Mhm.
But I think there is an obligation there that I think Stoics really look at for themselves, which is, we are a social people as human beings, right? And
Oh, yeah.
Stoics embrace that, right? And they
Species,
embrace, and
social
what that
species.
means, would say
I say a social species.
social species. Yes, that's a great way
Yeah.
to put that. We're a social species. We are meant to be together, right? And I think, the big thing for me is that the obligations that we hear about, I think weirdly enough for Stoics, they sort of don't say it's obligations like it's a trap or a binding thing or some kind of shackle that you have to wear. They view it more as like it's the obligation of what it means to be a real human being, right? To have that benevolence for others, to use wisdom when we make decisions, to have the courage to stand up when others are being harmed, to temper yourself so that you are not over overreaching in a situation. And those four cardinal virtues that we always talk about are really meant for that to take place, for those things to be able to take place. And those things are social in nature. No, I would be interested in your take on this in terms of the isolationist idea, but like ultimately the four Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, they include a social element. They always include an element about other people. It's never like, it's not courage to stand alone and be on an island by yourself. It's courage to stand up and protect others and do the right thing,
Hmm.
and those kinds of things. What's your take on that, though? Because ultimately, that's just my view of how I see the four Stoic virtues.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's how you act in society is what they're looking at, right? You already said courage. I mean, courage isn't just like going trying to pick a fight with a grizzly bear. That would be stupid. Courage is sticking up for people who potentially can't stick up for themselves. Defeating the Nazi, right?
Yeah,
I'm just using Nazis as an example here, since
great example.
yeah. Um, wisdom isn't just for you to get a lot of information in your head. You sit
Yeah,
around and just read encyclopedias, which I did as a kid. But it's
me too.
it's I think it's to add to the wisdom of the world. Whether
Yeah,
it's curing cancer or just a philosophical concept that you're exploring that helps other people. Hopefully,
right.
we're doing that right now, right?
Yeah,
Temperance is just part of being in a society, right? Anything that goes to the extreme, whether it's consumption or behavior in the extreme, is not necessarily helpful to you or society, right?
yeah,
We're talking about anger specifically.
hmm,
And part of that, to stick on temperance,
yeah,
which I usually just call self discipline, because I think it does include an element of just flat out discipline. Like, you just have to make yourself do the right thing sometimes. But
yeah,
I always notice, as a kid until today, there's like this elderly liberation. And what I mean, when you see older people, they become less concerned about what other people think. They tend to speak very bluntly, and they
hmm,
tend to just blow off like superfluous criticism. I'm not saying
yeah,
all elderly people like that, but since we're doing generalizations, I mean, we're talking about toxic
yeah,
males. I use generalizations, especially when they're positive, or at least my view is they're positive.
yeah,
But I've always noticed that, like, it's young people that get so slighted, and older people tend to just start realizing that it's not worth the effort, right? Somebody cuts you off, you just say, okay, man, you obviously have a place to go. You want to cut me off, right? Whereas young people
yeah,
are like, beeping on the horn and being
yeah,
aggressive in traffic. It's just an example.
yeah,
Or you ask a person that's, a little long in the tooth, their opinion on something, they just tell you. They're not trying to figure out how you stand on the topic and say it in a way that's
right.
not, that could be
There's
not
no posturing.
controversial, but it's not intended to be like pokey in the eye. It's just like straight at it.
Right.
I think that people would be better served if they go ahead and take some of that elderly liberation before they're elderly, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Right? Talk to your grandma, talk to your grandpa, and go, hey, they're really matter of fact. They tend to only focus on things that really matter. Maybe I
yeah,
should do that now rather than wait till, I get this enlightenment as I get older. Like,
right.
learn from other people is another way of saying it.
Sure.
And I think it's a great example of temperance. It's just people tend to get, at least what I've seen, more, okay, well, people are going to be like that. I don't need to be around them too. That's the other thing is,
Yeah,
part of being in society doesn't mean you have to be with everybody in society. If somebody is toxic, whether male, female, uh, you don't have to hang out with them.
no, no.
You can just, I would say politely, just go the other direction. Just, hey
Yeah,
man, that's just not my thing. And you're talking about these groups that are being created online that are attracting other young men. The first thing they can do is just not join them, right? They're promoting, you know, misogynist attitudes toward women,
yeah,
or obviously that, like, your particular group, and many of these are, of course, are white males,
sure.
um, is the best, and everybody else is subservient to you. And
Yeah,
I mean, you should automatically know that you're in the wrong spot. But the quickest way to get away from that way of thinking is to get away from that way of thinking, right? Just
yeah,
find other friends, man. It's not right, which is the first thing. It's also not right for you. It won't lead you down
right.
the right path. and it certainly isn't right for society.
Yeah, I think, there's one side of this, right, in terms of the wisdom side of it, for sure. Like we talk about, well, sitting around reading encyclopedias isn't helping. Well, no, but
I mean, if you tend to
interestingly,
use it for
yeah,
other
if you try to
people,
use
yeah,
it, but there's another thing too about, like, wisdom is not a one-way street, right? Like it doesn't just come in, it goes out, but also um, wisdom is also not, especially in today's day and age. Like I always laugh at this idea of, like, I have a device in my pocket that can tell me the sum of all human knowledge from history, all history, right? But it's also it's like a drinking from a fire hose, right? It's just throwing information at you. And one of the things wisdom will do is essentially ask you to question things, right? I mean, Socrates said that, right? Progenitor to Stoicism. And so, when you hear some of these things that people say, right? Like, I'll talk about something from the toxic masculinity world, which is people talk about this whole like alpha, beta, omega thing, right? Which is kind of it's usually tied to wolves, and it's usually tied to, like, I don't know, lions and gorillas and things like that. In reality, what we do know from science is that, especially with wolves, the whole alpha, beta, omega thing isn't actually really that real. It's sort of like it's an older concept. It doesn't really exist today. And we know, for example, that especially with wolves, because actually I saw a talk from a guy who was he was the key person to reinstitute or sort of reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone, right? He was
yeah.
talking as well, like it's not really a thing that's real anymore. Because, for example, if we were to go on this whole masculinity thing, right, then that would mean that there's one wolf who kind of runs everything and fights all the battles, and that's not really real. In fact, wolves, North American wolves, right, many times if they fight, the male is sort of standing up at the front of the pack, but his prime, like, mate is going to be right with him, sort of protecting his neck or something like that. I can't remember how that works. And it doesn't really matter that information specifically, but what I want people to take away from this is like, if you're in these groups, if you're hearing this information, like, the first thing you can do to better yourself is to, and this is something Stoicism, I think, would talk about, as well as just Socratic method in general, is vet out the information, check it out, right? Like, is this really what you believe? Is this what you want to believe? Does this resonate with you? Is it real? Because, in some of these spheres, and, you're seeing it in documentaries like Manosphere, where it's like, they're using these terminology that sounds very scientific. This is nature. This is how we're supposed to be. And then when you actually question it, you go, wait a second, that's not really right. The wolf thing is special to me. I have a connection to wolves in my private life that I don't really talk about, but I love wolves. I think they're incredibly interesting species. But at the same time, it's weird because you hear them misused as this, like, reason for guys to act certain ways. Like, well, I'm an alpha. Well, that's not really a thing, but okay. And that's the thing. So I would say for everybody, right? Like, the best way to check if these things resonate with you is to actually check if they make sense, check if they're real, because sometimes it's not real. Like, we had an anti-science episode, right, where we talked a little bit about I think it was vaccines was sort of when it came up, and, like, we're talking about misinformation from 60 years ago that's clearly being debunked, and you kind of go, well, you should just check. Anyways, that's a bit of a ranty type thing, but ultimately I think that's kind of where I think Stoicism clearly fights against this kind of thing, is you don't operate in a singular mindset, right? So, there we go.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're in headquarters of Global Institute right now.
Yeah.
So we too have a fascination. Wolves are, there's a reason to be fascinated. They are incredible. Their society is such that I think that's how they became so connected to us. They're
Yeah.
actually monogamous. They take care of their elderly. They know who their parents
Yes.
are. Um, they take care of their wounded. Like, they'll
Yeah.
get food for them. Uh, fascinating, fascinating. And one of
Yeah.
my
And even
favorite
with,
movies. Have you ever
yeah.
seen The Gray? By the way, The Gray.
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
Very good movie.
I find that a very stoic movie. But the reason being is, like, you just never give up. You never give up.
Right.
But that's another episode, I think, for us. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a great example of
Yeah. But
perseverance.
the things that you just highlighted about wolves, I mean, those are almost the antithesis of this toxic movement that we've been talking about, right? You know, there's no extreme
Right.
self-reliance. There's an empathy for other wolves. It's an interesting kind of way to shoot that down. Not that we're trying to shoot somebody's thoughts down. It's just like, you know, clearly it's an incorrect
Yeah, it's
statement.
actually countering itself, right? It's saying extreme
Yeah.
self reliance, and I'm an island, but I need a bunch of people around me to tell me I'm great and to say the same things on my
Right.
island that I'm by myself, that I'm self reliant. But I need you
Yeah.
to give me justification for my actions because I'm not really self reliant, and apparently I
Yeah.
don't want to be an island,
Yeah,
right?
and why don't we talk about that actually?
Uh,
Because you know it's come up in the misconceptions episode, and we've talked about it. But I think it's important that we talk about it here because there is this self reliance side that's what people are verbally saying out loud that you know you have to be yourself. And Stoicism is one that I think is regularly looked as an independence type thing, right? But I think we should talk about that a little bit because the toxic masculinity side of it is like, you know, you're your own emperor and you don't count on anybody else and whatnot. But I don't really know that that's what Stoicism is saying either. So I'd love to hear your take on this idea of self reliance, the way a Stoic would view it.
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting, like, if you think of self reliance as I serve society better for having more self reliance. I get it. I get it. I mean, one of the things that I'm a transplant here in Montana. My business partner references a statement I said once when we came back from traveling overseas, and I said, your people, every one of them looks like they could change a tire, and I mean that as a compliment, uh, obviously. In other words, like, there's a lot of places in society now, at least the U.S. society, especially
Right.
urban areas, where people just don't do anything for themselves.
Right.
They literally order their food. It comes pre-prepared, unless everything is done. And I don't know that it's a good thing. I think that being able to do things yourself, whether it's grow a tomato or you know, if you're a meat eater, hunt a deer and clean a deer and dress a deer and cook the deer, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever you're hunting. You get the point. Like, I
Yeah.
think that is a positive. If that's what they're promoting, like self-reliance, like I don't have to rely on somebody else for everything I do. I think that makes a better society,
Yeah.
personally. But if you take it to an
Sure.
extreme and you're basically just wanting to isolate yourself, which is a big problem for people that get
Yeah.
older, especially males. And I'm not saying I'm immune to that. That's
Right.
not helpful. That's not helpful. And maybe if the only group you can be part of is a Stoic group that talks about how self reliance is a good thing, but anything in extreme, generally speaking,
Yeah.
even exercise, can be bad for you. And I'm all about pushing yourself in exercise, so don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. But you get my point. Like, being self reliant is a good thing, I
Totally.
think. And I have a
Yeah.
lot. I have a lot of respect for folks that can just, like, hey, I need to change the oil in my car. I'm doing it myself.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Uh, I had something broke in my house and I fixed it myself. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's good. I think that's really good, and I think we should do more of it. I think I should do more of it. But I think a lot of what they're saying on self reliance is just not true. They're
Right.
basically wanting to justify their belief that uh, they're superior to everybody else.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's
Which
a
is
weird superiority to this that I think is odd that has always kind of thrown me. But in terms of self-reliance as well, I think as well, like what a Stoic is looking for in terms of like Pierre Hadot wrote a very famous book on Marcus Aurelius and his meditations called The Inner Citadel. And I think that's how I view this self-reliance more myself, which is that you have the ability to um, make decisions and not really fall apart when things go awry because you have built, you know, um, Citadel I don't like as a word sometimes because it feels like it feels isolationist because you're walling yourself off from something. But I think the foundation that you build within yourself is meant to be really used here within that terminology. So the self-reliance is like, um, when this is a very pedestrian example, but I'm usually the guy who does these. It's like you get the nasty email at work. You're treated poorly by a company. You lose your job. You get rear-ended, right? In many ways, for me, self-reliance is this idea that you are at least in control, not suppression, but in control of yourself enough to know that you can handle these situations. You can handle these situations well. I wouldn't say handle these situations on your own because I don't think that's true, but it's the self-reliance where it's like, okay, I've had a bad day, right? How am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with that? And taking responsibility for the actions that we take and taking responsibility for what we do next. That's the way that I see self-reliance in many ways because like, it's simple when you're a kid. It's not something goes wrong and you get caught and the teacher's like, "Why did you do that?" And it's like, "Well, Mikey made me do it." Mick made me do this podcast, for example. No, I'm just kidding. But ultimately, that's that thing where you kind of go, but are you like, is that true? Are you taking responsibility, right? What for yourself, for the things that you're doing? And I think that's a really, to me, that I think is a very stoic way to look at it. So that doesn't mean, that like I have a therapist, right? I work through stuff all the time, right? And those things are normal, but it's more, you use those types of tools as a basis to kind of build up this foundation that you have within yourself. And I think for me, that's the self-reliant part of it. So, I think that gets misunderstood though, right? Because people see the inner citadel. I mean, that's been used as a term for a long time, especially with Stoicism. And I think people see that and it goes back to the I am a man on an island type of thing. And you kind of go, well, that doesn't seem right to me. So, but anyways, that's the way I see self-reliance. You and I both come from backgrounds where I think we always did stuff just like you were saying. I fixed my sink a couple of weeks ago, and
I'd
I think
like
that's part of it too.
I mean, self-assessment, which I think is part of self-reliance, is I could do better at that. To be honest, I mean, now you can YouTube everything instead of just getting
Yeah.
somebody else to do it. But and I think part of self-reliance is just that, right? So if somebody tells you you did something that wasn't up to par, you should have the ability to go, okay, maybe I did, and look at
Right.
it objectively. And then if you did, take whether it was intentional or just negligence, accept
Yeah.
and then adjust yourself. But on the same token, if you are truly objective and you're just like, no, I didn't, then it's that person's issue,
Right.
right? Right, and this is the bullies, right? That just like to, I don't know, accuse people of doing things because they want them to feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
If that's the case, if you can, probably shouldn't be around that person.
Yeah.
That comes from self-reliance. Like you have to be able to do the real assessment. Is this
Right.
person telling me this because they want me to be successful in the future? Okay, that's important. Is it
Yeah.
accurate? Oh, that's even more important. What am I going to do to adjust it? And am I going to take responsibility for it?
Right.
And both of those answers, if the answers to the first two are true, should be yes, I'm going to do something about it and I'm going to acknowledge that I did it. But in the same token, you have to be honest with yourself. If it's just to, try to make you feel like uh, bad by yourself
Hmm.
and it's not accurate, then you should say that and move on. That's my
Yeah.
recommendation to young
Totally.
folks, especially since most of the time we are talking to young folks. But you have to
Right.
have that honest ability to assess your situation. A quote, since I try to like find a good quote. I think this is a
Yeah.
good one
It's quote
for
time with
what
Mick.
we're.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep. How much more harmful are the consequences of the anger than the causes of it? Marcus Aurelius, right? So you have to be responsible for your own actions. You can't really be responsible for other people's actions. So
Right.
even if it's a friend who has gone too far, it doesn't mean you got to follow
No.
it, right? You can just let it roll off your back and move on. That not that we're keeping score, but in my estimation, makes you the bigger person.
Right.
Simply
Well,
responding in kind isn't a positive way to do these.
yeah. And as Marcus said, right, the best revenge is not to be like that. But
But what
I don't like the word
I,
revenge in that term because it sounds like
yes,
it's scorekeeping. But I know what you mean.
yeah, there was. So I also found some
Yeah, you had
stats
some
on
statistics we
males.
wanted to talk about. That'd be
Yeah.
interesting. Let's take a look.
So, and this is important to point out. If there's a professor named Scott Galloway that really dives deep into this, and I think his information is very helpful. And it's not about. I think where some
Right.
groups go wrong is they look at it as competition. So, because of the liberation of women, which is obviously a great thing that has been promoted in Stoicism since its foundation,
Yes.
way before this was even talked about, right?
Oh yeah.
In the BC, in the BCE for your
Yeah.
cool kids. Um, the the That's great, and of course, as soon as women were allowed to compete on an equal footing, they do really well because we all know they're very smart. Generally speaking, again, generalization, but it's a positive one, so I'm using it. We do have to be concerned, therefore, that a lot of males are not going in the right direction. So we want to promote
Right.
everybody, right? So uh, the percentage of males in college now has gone down dramatically. The one stat
Really.
that he has is, well, that's the labor force. We'll get there. But right now we're only at 42% of college students are males. And I'm
Really.
not talking about, creating some quota system at all. But we probably, one, we should talk about, well, maybe that's because I realize that going to college isn't the end all be all.
Right.
If that's the case, okay, maybe we shouldn't worry about it so much. Maybe they're going to get a trade, which,
Yes.
I mean, you can logically go, oh, maybe it is better to get a trade than to go get to be the, another person with a liberal arts degree that can't find a job that goes and becomes a barista,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
nothing against baristas, but you get my point. So,
Yeah.
but if it is an issue where men are just opting out of education, I think we should address it. It's not to say that we're not super happy that females are now crushing it,
Yeah.
uh, but it doesn't mean we want to leave the men behind. And then this is translating to, and this I think all comes from Galloway's statistics. The labor force participation of men 25 to 34 has fallen by over 700,000. This is in America, fewer men than working today than in 2004.
Boy, that's not a small number.
Right, because we have more people since
Yeah.
2004, but we have
Yeah.
700,000 less men in the workforce. To think about that,
Right.
that's not good.
Hmm.
11%
Interesting.
of prime age men are not in the workforce at all. That's double since 1960. Okay, and what else? So you got education. Now you got jobs,
Yeah.
uh, deaths by despair, which I guess is another way of saying suicide. Um, 3 out of 4 deaths by suicides are male. Males are 4 times more likely to kill themselves than women. Suicides by young men, and this is probably the statistic I will stop on, have gone up 26% in 13 years.
And I think, when you see numbers like that start to come out, you get to this point where you go, "Oh, this is I to me this is actually a direct result of this sort of toxic movement that's been going forward, right?" Because my other thing is that it's preaching something that's kind of not real. It's not really unattainable. And so, a lot of people feel despair because of job stuff, right? Like, I don't have a great job or something like that. I'm working, but I don't have a cool job. I'm not a leader. And, I hear that a lot from people, especially, especially young men. I do mentor as much as I can in the engineering work that I do. And I think it's one of those things where, I don't think it's, I'm not sure I can describe a causal link here where it's definitely causal, but I think you can correlate that there's definitely a trend, like toxicity going up, deaths by despair going up. I wouldn't be surprised if they were connected, because again, also it's that whole exclusionary sort of us versus them thing. You're either winning because you're a toxic male or you're not.
Right.
I don't think that's a good place for us to be in.
Right. The other aspect of that is, are these things happening because of these movements, or are these movements happening because of these things? And what I mean by that is, men are brought up, and it's not a negative, that they're
Right.
supposed to be the provider and the
Mm-hmm.
protector. I think that's a positive trait for males. I'm not saying they can be the only provider, but you should want to be a provider. I mean, or
Yeah.
else you're just a consumer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You should want to be a protector, not somebody that just has to be protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't have everybody that's a consumer and a protectee, right?
Sure.
That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad thing. And I'm not saying it's exclusive to males, but it is something that males believe in their heart, I think, that they are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And if they can't do that anymore because they can't get into college, because they're not that interested in a lot of the courses that go into
Right.
college, and then they can't get a job, or they don't feel like the job's, taking them anywhere, and then they can't have a family, so then they're not a provider and a protector. So then what are they? And then they go to find other men like themselves to try to justify why they are where they are. It's more
Right.
of a symptom than a
Yeah.
cause.
Yeah.
So, and I think society's job is not just to go, okay, you group of people suck. It's like, well, why are you doing that? And what can we do to change your perspective
Yeah.
and get you on the right track?
Yeah.
It's easy just to chastise people for, behavior
Sure.
that's counter productive. So I think we need to look at that. And again, not to change it so that females do less well. We should all promote the idea that females
Yeah.
are doing really well. But we should say, okay, what are we going to do so that males also are progressing? Because these stats, unless they're wrong, and I don't believe they are wrong, I've never seen anybody debate these stats.
Right.
Here's another. It gets worse. It doesn't get worse than suicide, but 1 in 4 men under 30 report having no close friends.
Right.
Like, that used to be unheard of. Like,
Yeah.
even like introverts like myself had friends, close
Yeah.
friends. Now there's a whole group, and some people might not even know this because they come from my generation or older, or your generation or older.
Yeah.
But they don't realize what's going on under us. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of people that are just their relationships are um, just online. They're not real. They don't really actually go have coffee with people or drink a beer with people. They don't go to
Yeah.
parties. Like, people don't go to parties. I mean, I
I
heard
know.
somebody promoting, like, we need to start drinking again. And it's a headline grabber, because you're like, you sure that's a good thing? Well,
Yeah.
their point wasn't actually alcohol consumption.
We need to
The
be
point was
social again. Yeah.
alcohol consumption has dramatically gone down because
Right.
people aren't socializing.
Right. Yeah.
You see, it's an issue.
Yeah.
And then you're going to add AI as a substitute for real relationships. That's coming, and we all know it.
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
on people, I think, to address this now, rather than
Absolutely.
wait till it's a complete crisis.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, the one challenge you get with this, toxic masculinity sphere that people are talking about all the time as well is they sell a lot of like fast fixes to it, right? Like, go to the gym. Not that I'm against going to the gym, but like go to the gym, trade on the market, invest in my Bitcoin thing or whatever, right? I'm not even going to get into Bitcoin. I think it's ridiculous. But, the one thing that, I think Stoicism counters with this is this idea of you've got to be asking yourself, like, am I living well or not? Am I trying to do a fast fix or a shortcut, or, go around the normal way to do something, right? Why am I doing that? Is it working? Is it helping? Is it doing something right? And you got to ask yourself that question. Because I think one of the reasons why so many people aren't going to university is because they're sold on this idea of like, I've got a Twitch account and I play video games online and I talk about, why I'm a really strong man. And then, I get a lot of likes and I get the occasional bit of money that comes in. But ultimately, that's a short term fix for a thing that's a lot bigger than that. Your life, your goals, your vocation, your career, your, what you do with your time on this earth. That doesn't get solved by having a really great Twitch account, right? Not to slam Twitch, but you know what I mean. It's
What
like
is Twitch? I don't even know what you're talking.
Twitch is a platform. It's kind of like it's a live streaming platform for video gamers.
Wow.
So you get people who get paid to play video games and people watch them play. It's kind of like if you were to watch somebody make something in a woodworking shop live, but just imagine it's a video game instead. It's easier with video games because it's just you stream it from your computer. It's a streaming platform. So it's kind of like YouTube, but it's done in the live sense more. But the thing is I think so much of this is sold as like a quick fix, like, be aggressive, be assertive, go to the gym, invest in Bitcoin, your life will be better. And you kind of go like, is it better? And I think that's something that we have to think about here, right? Like, people are being sold this short-term gain thing, which is not really helping. Like the number of there are lots of other websites out there for doing stuff, right? Like, ones with the initials OF or ones with the, YouTube or Twitch or whatever. Those sites are great, and we use those sites ourselves. You and I use YouTube to promote the podcast and get ourselves out there. But ultimately, it's meant to be like an added thing with our conversations. It's not meant to be the solution that kind of solves all of your problems. In reality, the the problems are still there, right? Like ultimately Stoicism comes down where you're looking for eudaimonia, right? You're looking for living with arete, with virtue. Like that's the key thing. Are you doing that with your clickbait video on TikTok? I don't know that that's really working. And unfortunately, I think we're underserving this population of young people. Men are a huge part of that. I think women as well, young women as well. But ultimately, you're in a spot where people are being underserved and oversold on this idea that you can do these quick fixes and upgrade your life. And it's like, well, life human life isn't really that different when you look at it at the basics. It's not really that different since it was when we started walking upright 400,000 years ago or whatever it was, right? So I think we have to be very careful with some of these things when they come forward. And I think you're right. We have to take some actions on this. I don't know what that is, right? But we have to take some actions on this because I really feel for some of the young men out there that I mentor where it's like, I would struggle too. You're being told that you're not good enough because you're not aggressive. Well, that's a very weird place to be in.
Yeah. So. And let's remember that, from whatever the ills of the past are not the responsibility of the kid that just got here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So let's not pent up all of our, I don't know what the right.
Yeah, we're not blaming. Well, we're definitely not blaming young people. If I think you and I would both want to make it clear.
I've heard white males tell me, well, when I say anything about anything that I feel it's negative, I basically college is all I get is, well, you're a white male, so you're just super privileged and
right.
You've always had everything and we've had nothing, so shut up.
Right.
All that does is make people, one, just stop engaging because
yeah, sure, you've shut them down.
They can't. It's doing the same thing that they claimed that they were against, right? I'm looking at your skin color and your gender, and I'm saying that I've decided that you're this because of the intangible attributes.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what the other side did that you were against. So if you're going to be the same as them, then you're just as fucked up, to be honest. So what I'm saying is we should identify this as an issue in these toxic groups as symptoms.
Yeah.
Not something to be criticized and ostracized, but to be understood so that we can help turn these young, in this case, males around.
Yeah. Understood so they can be addressed.
Yeah.
So we can debunk it. Well, I think that's a good place for us to stop today on this episode. We've just had a week off as well. So, welcome back after a week's hiatus, Mick. But I think this is another one where we'd love to hear from the community. So, feel free to write us, info@pubandporch.com. Leave a comment on the video. We really would like to hear from the community of men and women out there who practice this philosophy or are just coming to it, because this is I think this topic what we talked about today is one that's going to resonate for a long time going into the future. And I'd love to see us be able to turn it around, both for those of us who are like Mick and I in a certain age category, but also for those young people who are coming up into the world today. Any closing thoughts from yourself today, Mick?
No, this is one of the main things that I think helps connect Stoicism from the past to Stoicism in the future, and why we call this applied Stoicism. So I guess I did have a closing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. All right, Mick. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.